Welcome to Another Perspective, an hour of exciting and informative topics and views with a fresh, new, effective perspective on issues that affect our community. With your host, Dr. Leon Finney.
Hello, this is Leon Finney, your host of Another Perspective on WVON Talk Radio. Each week, my guests and I offer our insights on local, national, and international issues that impact the lives of our people in the fields of business, education, health, politics, and religion. This week, of course, we have an exciting guest with us. But before I introduce our guests, I want to just give some foundation about where we're coming. You know, they say that it's a sorry dog that won't wag his own tail. And today we're going to get into some economic development at the community level. And many of you have asked me to sort of discourse on what we've been doing in Woodlawn for over 50 years. And so I just want to say a few words about that. Some of you will pick up many of the comments that we are having on this program for now and for the future in the Chicago Defender, because we're going into partnership with the Chicago Defender. So, but anyway, let me get on to this Woodlawn business. The Woodlawn organization, as you probably know, I headed it for many, many years. And one of the things that we did was stop the University of Chicago from tearing down the whole neighborhood. And then, of course, we went on to drive the effort to desegregate public schools and end legalize segregation in the public schools. We went on to create job programs for the hardcore unemployed and job counseling programs. We created the TWO Head Start program for a number of years, educating young people. We went on to deal with the gangs, the infamous, if you will, Blackstone Rangers, as well as the East Side Disciples. We had a program getting them jobs. And of course, we went on to put together the Woodlawn Experimental Schools Project and program. That program was the first iteration of how we could experiment with changing schools, changing public schools. The Whitney Young wasn't even thought of in those days. But anyway, we involved ourselves with that. We created the first HMO right in Woodlawn. It was called the Greater Woodlawn Assistance Corporation. And of course, we've gone on to do many, many other programs of that nature. We had something called the Urban Restoration Corps, where we were training young people as to how to get involved in the construction trades. I would say that over the last 50 years, we probably trained and put over 30,000 African-American male and females into job situations down through the years. And so I just want to get you on the page that the Woodlawn organization is still there working hard to make a difference in the community of Woodlawn. And then, of course, we have the Woodlawn Community Development Corporation, which is a not-for-profit corporation, but licensed to do business in the business sector. And it was founded in 1971, and it was founded because there was nobody that was interested in the 60s and the 70s in investing in Woodlawn. And so when it came to building housing, no banks were willing to loan money in Woodlawn. Woodlawn had been redlined. And so the Woodlawn Community Development Corporation was developed back in 1971, and we've worked with every government program, since there was no private money, Brother Monroe, no private money, we had to use the government money in order to build houses. We worked with the programs 221D3, 221D4, Section 235, Section 8, Section 236, and of course the low-income tax housing program. Over the years, we have built over 3,000 units of affordable housing at a total cost of $320 million. And my sense is that this is a living testament to the kind of things that the Woodlawn organization is doing. Right now, Woodlawn Community Development Corporation, right now we manage about 7,200 affordable housing units across the city of Chicago. And just until recently, we were managing all of Gary Housing Authority's portfolio. We employ 400 African Americans. We employ 20 Asian Americans. We employ 33 Hispanic Americans. We work in 13 neighborhoods and 12 wards. And guess what? We're here to stay. And here we go, my brother. I want now, after I gave you that little bit of stuff, you'll pick that up in the Chicago Defender. We'll be, I think, coming out this week, if not this week, next week, with a whole series of stories on the Woodlawn Organization, the Woodlawn Community Development Corporation, and how we as an organization have worked with many of the residents on the South Side to make a difference in the South Side. But let me tell you, friends, we've got a wonderful guest with us today. This is one of the baddest young brothers I ever met, period. And some would say that, I guess Barack Obama coined the phrase audacity. Well, this brother has the audacity to believe that as an entrepreneur and businessman, he can make a difference. He is the head of the Monroe Foundation, a very, very important foundation in the city of Chicago, in the state of Illinois, and guess what? In the United States of America. He founded this group, and before we get into what it does, I want Brother Otis Monroe to please give our listening audience an insight on who you are and where you came from, you bad brother.
Well, thank you, Reverend Dr. Finney. I am a native Chicagoan. I was born in Woodlawn, 6315 South of Ingleside, and grew up in the Woodlawn community, eventually moved to the Inglewood community. But I am a community organizer, really, by volunteer profession. A graduate of Roosevelt University and California State University at Northridge. I've been an adjunct faculty professor for the City College of Chicago. I've been a kindergarten teacher. I've even been an actor. In fact, after graduation from college, I came back to Chicago in '82 to perform Shakespeare.
So where'd you go to school? Locally?
Locally, I went to Bryn Mawr Elementary School, now Boucher, and then I did a year at South Shore High School, and then when I had moved to California, and I completed high school there, William Howard Taft.
Okay, but you also went to Dumont, didn't you?
Oh, I'm sorry, Dumont?
Yeah, don't leave out Dumont, man, because we got some people from
I cannot.
the hood.
I'm sorry, I cannot leave out Alexander Dumas Elementary School, where my kindergarten teacher, I always remember her, Mrs. Codwell, and I hope and pray she's still with us, because she used to always, she had her own theme song, and it was "Good morning to you, Mrs. Codwell, Mrs. Codwell." She always made us sing this song, but I appreciated that because it really started the morning very energetically for all of us. Got us started.
All right, Brother Monroe, here's the deal. We've got some challenges ahead of us.
We do. And
one of them, I think we can't avoid dealing with this, and this is unemployment. Mm-hmm. I've got a piece that came out a month ago by Brother Timothy Williams. He was interviewing a brother by the name of Don Buckley. Lost his job driving a Chicago Transit Authority bus almost 2 years ago, and has been looking for work ever since. Even as other municipal drivers around the country are laid off, Buckley is out of work. He's 34 years old, has 2 daughters, and he and his fiancee just moved into a basement apartment in his mother's house. He's had to delay marriage, and his entire savings have been gone. Mm-hmm. He had $27,000, and that's all gone. He says, I was the kind of person who put away for a rainy day. He said, but recently it's a flood now. Mm-hmm. Buckley is one of tens of thousands of once solidly middle-class African-American government workers, bus drivers in Chicago, police officers and firefighters, nurses and doctors. What's going on? How do we explain this unemployment? Now it's creeping into the public sector. Obviously, the private sector has already been suckling wind, but now people in the public sector, bus drivers and police officers and firefighters, are losing their jobs. What's going on?
Well, from where I sit, Reverend Dr. Finney, it appears to be an almost attack on the middle class, and particularly the middle class that are largely made up in one aspect of government employees. We noticed the attitudes of members of the Tea Party and those in the Congress, and certainly within in the states, and particularly in Wisconsin, the most highlighted example of recent in terms of passing new legislation that takes back the benefits of government employees, with the perception being, or the canard, as Harold Washington used to say, that's trying to be perpetrated, is that the wages and the benefits of government employees, which help them become part of the middle class, is such now that it's actually hurting the economies.
What do your point? Because, Brother Monroe, some would argue, and some economists argue, that were it not for the government jobs, many blacks would never have gotten to be a part of the middle class.
Absolutely. That is why, to your point, and the point I'm coming to as well, is let's take what the plans announced a few months ago to go.
And for sure, you've got a situation right here, Brother Monroe, that I think that we've got to deal with, and that is the disparity between what's happening with the African-American middle class and what's happening with white America. Here's an interesting statistic. In 2009, the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that unemployment rate for white males at 9.9. For black males, the same year, the unemployment rate was a staggering 20.2. Now, it hadn't gotten better. Today, right now, for African American males, we are 21.4% unemployed.
Right.
We are twice the unemployment of white America.
Right.
How do we explain this disparity when Jesse Jackson, listen to what Jesse Jackson says. Jesse Jackson says, Reverend Jesse Jackson says, whites are living in a recession and blacks are living in a depression.
Right.
So my point is that there seems to be something interesting going on, and let's go back to what this brother says. When I go in and apply for a job, I have all the credentials. Now, this is a black man. I have all the credentials, but I think part of where it talks about the ethnic race you are, that usually gets me denied a job, said Jeremy Wilson, a 26-year-old African-American resident of the West Side, Austin's neighborhood. Most of us are positive black men. We are married. We have families, and it's hard out here. What's up here? Well, we've got a situation now where people are saying, well, if you're black, you're not able to get a job. That's my generation, not yours. That's the generation for my father and my father's father, where if you were black, you were the last hired and first fired.
Right.
But now it looks like if you're black, you can't get a job right here in the city of Chicago, no matter where.
Right.
Hey, listen, if you're out there, this is Leon Finney. I'm your host on Another Perspective. Call us. The call number is 773-591-1690. That's 773-591-1690. 1690. This is Leon Finney, your host of Another Perspective. Call us. We are here. We've got Brother Otis Monroe here. He's a bad brother. He's clear about where he's going and where we got to go. Now, I just want to raise one other thing, Brother Monroe, and then I ain't going to say too much more. But here's another thing that comes out of Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson's mouth. He says, and I quote, 56 years ago, it was horizontal segregation. We could not sit side by side. We cannot drink water side by side. Cannot go to the hospital in the same room side by side. What he's saying is horizontal segregation. We couldn't be with white folk in restaurants. We couldn't be sitting next to white folk on the bus. We couldn't sit next to white folk on the train or what have you. We couldn't even be in the same work room in many instances with white folk, because it was horizontal segregation, he said. He said, but now it's different. He says, Reverend Jackson said, but now it's a floor, not a wall. Some reports indicate that we've lost half of black wealth in the last 2 years. Now, you're an economist. Now, that's what you mess with. So what about this loss of wealth, and are we wealthier now than we used to be, or where are we at?
Well, we're broke. I think that's just the sum of it. And the reason why is many different factors. Let's take our ability, there's a disparity in our ability to get the same kind of mortgages or access to credit that has a vast difference from the ability of our counterparts, whites, with similar incomes, similar backgrounds of education, similar years of experience, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, the Woodstock Institute about a year ago put out a report on the credit, called the credit disparity. So that is a large contributing factor to the wealth disparity or the asset disparity, because we tend to be charged a higher rate of interest for a mortgage, for a car loan, or other related fees than whites are, and thus we are paying a larger sum of money or creating a larger amount of debt in comparison to others.
Now, you were at our hearing on mortgage foreclosure back in the summer. One of the things that we discovered right along when white folk lost a lot of their equity and wealth, we did too. We did it because we were heavily invested in real estate and in our homes. And so when the market imploded and the home that we paid $200,000 or $300,000 in for 10 years ago, say in 2000 or 1998, that home, the value of that home now is less than $200,000. The value of that home may be only $150,000, or maybe less than maybe $250,000. It was a $300,000 home. So the question I'm pushing is that we could have lost wealth just because the recession hit. We may not have done anything wrong.
Hit us hardest, absolutely.
Yeah. So in many instances, we lost all of our equity that we built up over years just because the housing market went south. So my point is, we have lost the wealth that we used to have to leverage them for college loans, all kinds of things. We could use that equity to get or to buy. If we got into trouble, we could borrow money against our home. Now, we don't have anything at home to borrow with.
But Reverend Finney, part of that was how those loans were made. There was a disparity just in how loans were marketed in the African-American community versus predominantly white communities. So in certain communities like the Inglewood community, the Alston community, the Roseland community, even parts of the Woodlawn community, largely African-American communities, more of the marketing of loans were of predatory type.
I got to take this call here because Brother Dr. Baskin is with us. Dr. Baskin?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm listening to your show, and as with many other shows who are discussing a similar topic, I have yet to hear a focus on why African Americans are unable to work together to create businesses and therefore hire their own time.
Okay.
I grew up in Arkansas.
All right.
I grew up in Arkansas, and I never missed a blue jay feeding a robin. They take care of their own.
All right. But Brother Dr. Baskin, the man to answer that question is sitting right to my immediate right. He is Otis Monroe of the Monroe Foundation. I'm going to let him go at it right now.
Well, my response to that would be, I think there are pockets and times when there appears to be disunity among African-American business development or business advocates. However, I think more and more there are business development advocates who are coming together. In fact, there's the Washington Park Chamber of Commerce, which had a very strong business-to-business networking and coalition-building dialogue, as well as the Southside Community Credit Union, and as I mentioned earlier, the Black Wall Street Project. Again, we have to define what is working together. And I think most groups tend to come together, or the process has been, let's come together and talk about how we can do business with each other. Well, that's the old model now. We need to create new models. And the most effective model we need to be pushing is one of how do we influence the opportunities we want to see, and the way to begin to influence it is through advancing public policy that actually acts and serves our particular economic interests. Other communities are doing it. we are not doing it. We're still using an old model that has worked before, but in the days of old. Come together and how do we do trade with each other? But if we advance policy that becomes law, that becomes the mandate locally, regionally, or nationally, now there's certain prescribed processes that everybody has to adhere to, and that is not the case right now. We need to change the paradigm. We need to change the organizing model. We need to change the coalition push model, and we must begin in the African American community, as we did with the Civil Rights Movement, is push public policy as a component of the other mobilization that we're doing.
All right, Brother Dr. Baskin, we're going to have to move on. We're going to have to take a short break. Hey, this is Leon Finney, your host on Another Perspective. I have with me Brother Otis Monroe. We're discussing unemployment. We're discussing business. We're discussing ways that black folk can be able to connect together to make a difference for themselves and their families. This is a brother who's created something out of his own energy and his own mind, and we're just so happy to have him with us. Today, we're talking about jobs. We're talking about unemployment. We're talking about businesses. And wait a minute now, brother. We're also talking about the disappearing black business. And that's a challenge, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I can remember when this was the hometown of black business. It was almost like the mecca of all black businesses. It was right here in Chicago. You had Johnson Publishing. That was John H. Johnson of Ebony Magazine and Jet Magazine, and then you had the defendant Parker House Sausage. You had that. Joe Louis Mill, Calder Road. You follow me? And you had Al Johnson Cadillac. You had Johnson Product. They were making the hair product. You had Soft Sheen, and the list goes on and on. Of course, you had Leon's Barbecue. My dad was in that group. You had so many soul food restaurants and restaurants. We had drugstores that were in the community, and we had all kinds of thriving things. And I think that in those businesses, in those days, guess what? We were the northern boundary when I came to Chicago many years ago with my parents. The northern boundary for the black community was 12th Street. The southern boundary was 69th or South Chicago. The western boundary was State Street or the Dan Ryan, and the eastern boundary was Cottage Grove. We were there, all packed in one very powerful community, and that was the 1st Congressional District, and we were the ones who set the tone in many instances. But now, my brother, we've sort of spread out. Integration has taken its toll. We've lost over 180,000 blacks that were living in the city of Chicago in 2000 are no longer living in Chicago. They're outside of the city of Chicago. So much of the base, the economic base for that, and I would argue that's the middle class blacks that moved out of the city of Chicago and moved to the suburbs away from the old neighborhood. But in the process, we've also lost so many businesses. So how do we explain it, and what do we do about that?
Well, I think one of the things we begin to do is how do we create again from within. That's what your generation and your parents' generation did. They created the opportunity, because as we were talking in the green room before the start of the show, your parents came to Chicago with a sense of purpose, and that purpose was God, family, enterprise, legacy. Legacy, just as the scripture calls for, that we pass on or we create a legacy. So there's always some sustaining force that's from generation to generation.
That's right.
Now that is not the case. That same resolve, that same sense of purpose in the African American community doesn't exist anymore, because I know of African American businesses that have ceased to exist, also because the next generation, maybe that third generation, did not want to take the business over.
Right.
Or they took the business over. They were not fully positioned within themselves to competently run the business, so they either sold the business or it was seized by the government through taxes, those kinds of things. So now, again, in our earlier first segment, what is the new model? How do we recreate?
Yeah, you tell us that.
How do we recreate?
We know things are bad. We're looking for the promised land and the promise. Okay.
What we can begin to do, I'm very adamantly supportive of the leadership of City Treasurer Stephanie Neely
All right. That's a sister, right?
It's a sister.
All right.
To provide a funding to the Southside Community Credit Union on 55th and Wentworth to provide micro loans, I think, for entrepreneurs up to about $15,000, and the cap for existing businesses is $35,000. Now, it's not a significant sum of money, but it's
But
still
it's a help for a startup business.
It's a startup or a business that needs to expand. So, but what's not happening is that, because at the same time, Reverend Finney, we can't talk about the diminishing black economy and the diminishing black business, and now we have an opportunity to encourage the expansion of it, and folks are not banging on the doors to apply for
They're
those
not
loans.
banging on the door.
They're not. It's not happening. As opposed to the Northside
Right.
Community Federal Credit Union would also receive the same facilitation from the city treasurer's
And they're
office.
tearing the door off the hinges.
They're doing significant volume.
Well, here, I want you, and I want to make sure that you hear what Brother Otis Monroe said. My brothers and sisters out there that are complaining that you want to get in business and you want to start a business, he's saying that there is a credit union right now
55th and
in
Wentworth.
existence. Go ahead, give them the address again. And
South-
what's the name of it,
The
please?
Southside Community Federal Credit Union, headed by Greg Brown at 55th and Wentworth, right in the 55th and Plaza there, right next to Harris Bank. They have microloans between $15,000 is the cap for entrepreneurs and $35,000 is the cap for small businesses. Now, here's the other dynamic, though, too, I found, because back in August, we held a workshop with the Southside Credit Union to help them get the word out about the microloan program. Now, let's tell the truth. Now, black folks listening today, you can't have it both ways. You can't walk into the credit union and say, well, it's just like the bank. They told us we got to go through this paperwork and that paperwork. If other folks have to go through the paperwork, you have to go through the paperwork as well. And at base, all that the paperwork requires is to submit a business plan with the application. So, Dr. Finney, they don't have a business plan. Well, the credit union has a partnership with Chicago State University, with the Business Development Center, headed by Isabel Conda, and Jane Addams Hall House, which has a satellite office at 67th and Eberhard in the Parkway Community House. So if you don't know how to put a business plan together, go
They'll
and
help
learn
you.
how to put the process together so that you can apply for the money. It's basic kinds of things, but we have to get away from this. We don't want to comply just because we're.
You got to play by some rules.
You got to play by some rules, and this is one of the most reasonably processes to facilitate.
All right. You see, and I want to make sure that we got that, because this brother, Otis Monroe, is hooking us up. Now, I'm going to have to take a call. Brother Joe, you're on.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, about the unemployed and black American, they go back to work when the government enforces the immigration law and they put all the illegal alien, because they say, the politicians say they do the job we don't want to do. That's not true. They are using it for year. And then enough is enough. Reagan gave amnesty to 6 million, now it's 12 million, and that another 10 years be another 10, 50 million. That's got to be stopped.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your call. Thank you so much, Brother Joe. We're here now talking about opportunity, right? And we know that things are not good, but we have to, at some moment, shift from complaining
Traction.
to planning.
Absolutely.
And to hooking stuff up.
Right.
Am I right or wrong?
You are correct. You are absolutely
And so we know that black businesses and black folk have been under siege for a long time. But even though they have been under siege, we've survived it.
Yes,
Right?
right.
We know at this particular point that there are organizations out. I mean, you got at this moment, at this particular point, you've got Reverend Jesse Jackson Jr.
With the Trade
That's
Bureau.
at this particular point under siege because somebody has decided to break ranks and deny this brother an opportunity to go back to United States Congress. Now, you can say what you want to say about him, about whether or not you like the color of his hair or what have you, but at the end of the day, he is African-American, and he's there. He has been representing the interests of black folk, and well, I'm not endorsing him on this, but you black folk have to start thinking about what's going on, and black men and black leaders are being attacked every day and undermined every day, and the organizations, institutions. And when white folk get through tearing up the black base of business and organizations that we got, then we're going to try to figure out what we're going to do. My point is this: we have to be very, very clear that every African-American business that we have, we've got to work to make sure that we hook them up and those businesses are viable.
Absolutely.
And we've got to take our own leaders. If our leaders misbehave, we got to take them in the closet and say, hey, look, you got to straighten up and fly right, because we need you to be successful, not out here getting your head bashed in by the white media every other day. So my point is this: we've got to begin to discipline ourselves, and we've got to begin to use what we've got in order to build for a better future. Now, I'm going to let you have you got 15 more minutes to handle this and tangle with this particular issue about what we're going to do to get black businesses back into operation, and furthermore, how we're going to employ our own.
Well, again, if we have vision from an elected official such as City Treasurer Stephanie Neely to envision the ideal of that the new model for lending in struggling communities, particularly in struggling African American business communities, is the creation of micro lending opportunities, coupled with the fact that even the city of Chicago about 3 weeks ago announced a partnership with another micro enterprise lender called Axion, and they created the Micro Lending Institute, which also has some of the banks participating in. But more closely and more intimately in the African American community is the Southside Community Federal Credit Union, which also partners with VON to support the initiative. If we can, Dr. Finney, increase the loan volume from African-American entrepreneurs and African-American businesses to take advantage of this micro-lending opportunity, which has much more flexible terms of access than going to a mainstream financial institution, because as you know, Dr. Finney, banks contribute to micro-lending programs so that they can meet their CRA obligations that they can through lending that they cannot do directly. That's the purpose of a micro loan, because the micro loan programs, the lending criteria and the standards are set by the nonprofit intermediary. So those criterias and the standards of qualification and access to the fund are more community-driven and are more in line with the economic realities that struggling businesses are faced with. We must increase participation in that African American Institute to provide loans to African American entrepreneurs and businesses. Otherwise, it may not get that kind of facilitation again. And what will happen is that black business will begin to complain, we can't get a loan to start a business, we can't get a loan to expand.
Let me get it right, Brother Otis. What you're saying is there's money out there.
The money's there.
And what you're really saying is that we have to decide that we want to take a chance.
We want to take a chance.
And every entrepreneur that I've ever known, going all the way back to the first, decided at some point, I'm willing to take a chance in order to make my business work. My father did it. I did it at Woodlawn. I can't tell you how many chances I've taken to try to keep that operation going. You follow me? Going bankrupt, whatever it was, take a chance. My sense is a real entrepreneur is a risk taker.
Absolutely.
He or she are willing to put all their money in on a pile and say, look, I believe in myself, and I believe in God, and I believe in this market, and I believe in enough to take a chance to either win or lose. Right. You follow me? And if you're not willing to put your own self at risk, then I don't know how you can start a business. Nobody is going to give you a business where there's no risk at all. So black folk, you got to understand, if you want to be in business, you got to be willing to borrow the money, do the paperwork, and take a chance by working 18 hours a day if necessary to make your business work, and it'll work.
Other communities, though, done it. Absolutely. And with that, we can begin to, my earlier word, influence. Other communities are influencing their economies, their business quality of business attraction, business sustainability. We're not influencing in the way that gives us the legitimacy, the credibility, and the sustainability that Asian American communities are having, the Polish American communities, and certainly many in the Greek and Hispanic communities. They are leveraging their ability to influence not only public policy through enactment of ordinances or legislation, but also through the setup of special taxing districts, special funds, and other initiatives that contribute to their economic viability and bottom line.
All right, now, brother Monroe, in this last few minutes, tell us about what your foundation does.
Well,
what can we call your foundation and get help doing?
Sure. Well, the Monroe Foundation is a 20-year-old community reinvestment advocacy organization. Our principal focus is working with financial institutions that are looking for stronger ways to meet their community reinvestment obligations. And how we facilitate that is actually we've organized consortiums of community partners that are working on financial services, community development, affordable housing, and foreclosure intervention. And we target financial institutions in those regions to support those collaboratives directly and fund them, but fund them in the sense of being able to expand or run strong programs that provide financial education that's linked to financial access. That's the bottom line. Financial education that actually results in an unbanked or underbanked person able to actually open a bank account. Or how do, and our most recent example, Reverend Finney, was with Citibank a year and a half ago.
Y'all put the Citibank up against the wall, I heard.
Well, we put them up against the wall in the sense that they responded to an opportunity to work with their borrowers who were at imminent risk of foreclosure in about 15 zip codes in Chicago. How do we help a bank's borrowers who economic life has changed on the front end, Dr. Finney, stay in their homes? How do we focus less on banks saying, well, we're going to try to get people into the housing affordable, what they call the Obama plan? No, how do we, as the National Urban League is advocating for and pushing other advocacy groups, the interest in loan modification is not to an interest rate write down, it's how do we modify the principle of the mortgage so it's more in line, Dr. Finney and listening audience, with the economic realities of those families. I'm tired of pushing loan modifications. I'm more interested in how do we encourage banks to implement internally driven solutions that keep people in their home.
Before you get put out.
Before you get put out.
Before you get foreclosed on.
Absolutely.
So the point of what you're working on, Brother Monroe, is you're trying to keep people from getting foreclosed on.
From the beginning.
From the beginning.
By working bank by bank to find the internal solutions that can be implemented in partnership with community partners.
Now, here's the deal now. You done open the floodgate up. If you offer that service and you can hook people up, give the listening audience three things. Your mailing address, your some phone number,
sure,
as well as your email address.
Absolutely.
So that people can contact you. I don't want them calling me because I'm not doing what you're doing.
Sure.
But I want to make sure that people know how to hook up with you and hook up with your program so that we can see fewer people getting thrown out of their homes and more people staying in their homes.
Absolutely. You can contact Otis Monroe, the Monroe Foundation, directly at 773-315-9720, 773-315-9720. Our mailing address is 1547 South Wolf Road, Hillside, Illinois, 60162. And my email address is omonroe@themonroefoundation.org. And I will connect you to our housing action organization in your community. I answer my own calls. Be more than happy because, again, it's about helping humanity, helping people, and certainly helping African-American people.
Okay, you got it. So we're going to make sure that we hook up. We're going to take a short break. We've got a few more minutes, but we've got to take a short break. This is Leon Finney, your host on Another Perspective. We've been here now almost an hour talking about very, very powerful subjects as it relates to unemployment as well as business development and how we're going to make a difference in our own community by hooking up. I'm going to take a short break. Remember, our call number is 773-591-1690, 773-591-1690. We'll be right back. We're back here today with our last few minutes, but there's a Reverend James that promised to call in, and I want to make sure that we give him an opportunity to talk to us. Reverend James?
Yes, sir, Dr. Finney.
Okay, you're on.
Great. How you doing today?
I'm good. Reverend James, I'm trying to listen to you. What was your question, I thought?
I was supposed to call and engage in a conversation with you about the meaning of Christmas.
Oh, yes, sir. All right, then lay it out there. We've got about 3 minutes, Reverend James, to talk about the meaning of Christmas. Please do so.
Well, the real meaning of Christmas is the birth of Jesus Christ, the only Son of our Heavenly Father that brings all possibilities into being. He changed the very nature of time and split time in two.
All right.
From BC to AD.
All right. So this is Reverend James, and he is putting to us, those of you who are out shopping right now, I think that the real point that Reverend James is making is that don't leave the birthday of Jesus Christ out of your shopping. Now, what does that mean? It means it's oftentimes we think more about Santa Claus than Jesus Christ at this particular point. And so it's not about, for those of us of the faith, it's about Santa Claus and about buying gifts and giving gifts. It's about Jesus Christ's birth and what his birth and life means. And what birth and life means, I believe Reverend James would agree, is it means that we are here for peace on earth and goodwill towards all men. It means that we are here to take care of those who are the needy and the homeless and the jobless and those who are destitute. It means that our faith calls us to be concerned about those who are the least of God's children during this Christmas season, and not so much about whether or not we're downtown shopping in order to buy something we ain't got the money to pay for no-how. And sometimes what we're buying has limited use because it's not a necessity. But anyway, Reverend James, did I get the point pretty good?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Reverend James. And this is Leon Finney on Another Perspective. Now, I want to give you a little more information. We've had Brother Otis Monroe with us all evening, and he's talked about unemployment and what we got to do about unemployment. He's talked about business development. He's talked about a great African-American who is treasurer of the city of Chicago and what she's done putting money into a credit union in order to make loans available for our people. Now, let's not blow it. Let's make sure that we apply, go to the place to get a loan, fill out the paperwork, and make sure that you are able to get your startup business going, or you're able to expand your business. Mm-hmm. And when you get the loan and when you have your business, then don't forget to employ your own. Make sure that you hire somebody that looks like you so that we can deal with this devastating unemployment rate that is in the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, and the United States of America, where black men and black women are unemployed at greater number than white men and white women. Black men right now, 21.4% of the black men in the city of Chicago are unemployed. That's twice what is unemployed for the white community and for white males. And my sense is we got to do something about this. We cannot keep on just complaining. We got to stand up and do something about it. We got to stand up and get jobs. We got to stand up and make sure that we start business. We got to stand up and make sure that we hire our own. We got to stand up and make sure that we invest in our community. And guess what? Now you can go run and tell that.
Tell that.